Welcome back to the channel. Today's story is one that proves talent can come from the most unexpected places, and sometimes, the quietest people carry the loudest dreams. This is the unforgettable moment when Nicholas walked onto the Britain's Got Talent stage and left the judges completely speechless. The lights inside the theater were bright, the audience buzzing with the kind of excitement that only a live show can create. People were chatting, laughing, some nervously waiting for their favorite judge to speak. On stage, everything was calm, almost too calm, as the host finished introducing the next contestant. When the name Nicholas was announced, there was polite applause, nothing dramatic, nothing special. Just another audition, or so everyone thought. Nicholas walked out slowly. He wasn't flashy. No dramatic entrance, no confident wave to the crowd. He wore simple clothes, stood straight, and gave a small, respectful smile. You could tell immediately that he wasn't used to big stages. His shoulders were slightly tense, his hands clasped together for a moment before he let them fall to his sides. He took a deep breath and looked out at the audience, then at the judges. Simon leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, with that familiar look that said he had seen it all. Amanda smiled kindly, trying to make Nicholas feel comfortable. Alicia tilted her head, curious, while Bruno leaned forward, already animated, already expecting something entertaining. None of them looked particularly excited, but none of them looked bored either. It was that neutral space where anything could happen. The host asked Nicholas a few simple questions. His voice was calm but slightly shaky. He introduced himself, said where he was from, and explained that music had always been a big part of his life. He spoke about growing up feeling invisible, about being the kind of person people often underestimated. As he talked, the audience grew quieter. There was something sincere in his voice, something honest that made people listen. When asked why he came to Britain's Got Talent, Nicholas paused. He looked down for a second, then back up. He said he wanted to prove to himself that his voice mattered. Not to be famous, not to impress anyone, but to finally be heard. That simple sentence landed harder than expected. Even Simon uncrossed his arms slightly, paying closer attention. Then came the moment every contestant fears and hopes for at the same time. Nicholas turned toward the band, nodded gently, and the music began. The first few notes were soft. So soft that for a split second, some people wondered if something had gone wrong. The audience leaned in. Nicholas closed his eyes, and when he opened his mouth to sing, everything changed. His voice was not what anyone expected. It wasn't just good. It wasn't just strong. It was emotional, controlled, and deeply moving. The kind of voice that feels like it's telling a story rather than performing a song. Every word carried weight. Every note felt intentional. You could hear years of quiet practice, years of singing when no one was listening. The room transformed. The audience, which moments ago had been restless, was now completely still. No whispers. No movement. Just silence and sound. Nicholas stood center stage, completely still, letting his voice do all the work. He didn't over-sing. He didn't show off. He simply sang from somewhere deep inside. Amanda's smile slowly faded into an expression of awe. Alicia's eyes widened, her hand covering her mouth without her even realizing it. Bruno stopped moving entirely, frozen in place, as if afraid that even breathing too loudly might break the moment. And Simon, the man known for his brutal honesty, leaned forward, elbows on his knees, staring at Nicholas with full attention. As the song built, Nicholas's voice grew stronger. The emotion became heavier. You could hear pain, hope, fear, and courage all wrapped together. It was clear this wasn't just a performance. This was personal. This was a release. Somewhere in the audience, someone started crying quietly. Then another. The camera cut to faces in the crowd, people wiping their eyes, hands pressed to their chests. Even the people who had come just for entertainment were now emotionally invested in this stranger on stage. When Nicholas reached the final chorus, his voice soared. Not in a loud, overpowering way, but in a way that filled every corner of the theater. It was controlled, effortless, and raw at the same time. He opened his eyes and looked straight ahead, no longer nervous, no longer small. In that moment, he belonged there. The final note hung in the air. Nicholas lowered the microphone slightly, breathing heavily, his chest rising and falling. For half a second, there was nothing. Then the theater exploded. The audience jumped to their feet in a standing ovation. Applause thundered through the room. Cheers, whistles, shouts of support filled the air. Nicholas looked overwhelmed, his eyes wide, his hands shaking slightly as he tried to process what was happening. He bowed his head, clearly emotional, clearly not used to this kind of reaction. The judges didn't speak right away. They just stood. Bruno was the first to break the silence, jumping up from his chair, clapping wildly, his face glowing with excitement. Amanda followed, standing and applauding, tears in her eyes. Alicia stood too, shaking her head in disbelief. And finally, Simon Cowell stood up. Slowly, deliberately, but he stood. That alone said everything. When the applause finally died down and everyone sat back in their seats, there was a long pause. Nicholas wiped his eyes discreetly, trying to stay composed. The host smiled, knowing this was one of those moments people would talk about for years. Amanda spoke first. Her voice was gentle but emotional. She told Nicholas that his performance was beautiful, honest, and deeply moving. She said it felt like he wasn't just singing to the audience, but inviting them into his world. She admitted she hadn't expected that kind of depth, and she thanked him for sharing something so personal. Alicia nodded in agreement. She said that Nicholas had a rare ability to make people feel something real. She talked about how the performance gave her goosebumps and how his voice carried a kind of truth you can't teach. She told him that moments like this are the reason shows like this exist. Bruno, as always, was dramatic. He said the performance was magical, that Nicholas had taken the entire theater on an emotional journey. He spoke about passion, vulnerability, and bravery, praising Nicholas for standing on that stage and opening his heart to millions of people watching. Then all eyes turned to Simon. Simon paused for a long time. Longer than usual. He looked at Nicholas, then at the audience, then back at Nicholas. The silence was heavy. Finally, he spoke. Simon said that when Nicholas first walked out, he didn't know what to expect. He admitted that Nicholas didn't look like someone who would deliver a performance like that. Then he smiled slightly and said that this was exactly why he loves being wrong. He said Nicholas had one of those voices you don't forget, the kind that stays with you long after the performance ends. He added that it wasn't about perfection, but about connection, and Nicholas had connected with everyone in the room. For a moment, Simon stopped talking. He seemed to search for words, something rare for him. He finally said that performances like this don't come around often, and when they do, you have to recognize them. The host asked for the votes. Amanda said yes without hesitation. Alicia said yes, smiling brightly. Bruno shouted yes, throwing his arms into the air. Simon looked at Nicholas one more time, then said yes. 4 yeses. Nicholas covered his face with his hands, overwhelmed. Tears streamed down his cheeks as the audience cheered again. He nodded repeatedly, whispering thank you, unable to fully express what he was feeling. As Nicholas walked off the stage, the judges continued talking about him. They speculated about how far he could go, how audiences across the country would respond to him. The cameras followed Nicholas backstage, where he leaned against a wall, breathing deeply, trying to calm himself. He laughed softly through tears, shaking his head as if he couldn't believe what had just happened. That audition didn't just change Nicholas's journey on the show. It changed how people saw him, and more importantly, how he saw himself. The quiet contestant who walked onto the stage unsure and nervous walked off knowing that his voice truly mattered. And that is why this moment became one of the most unforgettable auditions in Britain's Got Talent history. Not because of fireworks or tricks, but because one person had the courage to be real. Backstage, the noise of the audience was still echoing through the walls. Nicholas stood there for a moment, hands on his knees, breathing slowly as if he had just finished a long run. A production assistant offered him a bottle of water, which he accepted with a quiet thank you. His hands were still shaking, and he laughed nervously, trying to steady himself. Everything felt unreal. Just minutes ago, he had been standing alone on that massive stage, terrified that his voice might fail him. Now, people were congratulating him, smiling at him like he had done something extraordinary. As he walked down the corridor, other contestants looked at him differently. Some smiled with admiration, some nodded respectfully, and others whispered to each other, clearly impressed. Nicholas noticed it, but he didn't let it change him. He kept his head slightly down, still processing the moment, still replaying Simon's words in his mind. For someone who had spent so much of his life feeling overlooked, that validation hit deeper than he could explain. Later that evening, when the judges were interviewed about the auditions of the day, Nicholas's name came up again and again. Amanda described his performance as one of those rare moments where everything just feels right. Alicia said she couldn't stop thinking about his voice and how it made her feel calm and emotional at the same time. Bruno called him a dark horse, someone who could surprise the entire competition. And Simon, in his own way, admitted that Nicholas was the kind of contestant that reminded him why the show still mattered. When the episode finally aired on television, the reaction was immediate. Social media lit up within minutes. Clips of Nicholas's audition spread quickly, shared by people who had never even watched Britain's Got Talent before. Comments poured in from all over the world. People talked about how his voice gave them chills, how his story resonated with them, how they felt seen through his performance. Some said they cried without understanding why. Others said they replayed the audition over and over again. Nicholas watched the episode at home with his family. They sat together on the couch, nervous laughter filling the room before his audition came on. When his face appeared on the screen, his heart started racing all over again. He listened to his own voice, hearing it the way the world heard it for the first time. When the standing ovation happened on screen, his family burst into tears. His parents hugged him tightly, telling him how proud they were. For them, this wasn't just a TV moment. It was years of hard work, doubt, and quiet perseverance finally being recognized. As the competition moved forward, Nicholas returned to the stage for the live shows. This time, the pressure was even greater. People now expected something special from him. He knew that one great audition wasn't enough. He spent long hours rehearsing, working with vocal coaches, focusing not just on technique, but on emotion. He didn't want to lose what made that first performance so powerful. He wanted to stay honest. On the night of his first live performance, the theater felt different. The audience already knew his name. They cheered louder when he walked on stage. Nicholas smiled, taking it all in, but he stayed grounded. He remembered why he was there. He remembered the kid who used to sing quietly in his room, dreaming of being heard. The music began again, and Nicholas delivered another heartfelt performance. It wasn't about trying to outdo himself. It was about staying true. Once again, the judges were captivated. The audience responded with warmth and support. While the competition was fierce and full of incredible talent, Nicholas stood out because of his sincerity. Week after week, he continued to grow. Sometimes the judges offered constructive criticism, encouraging him to push himself in new ways. Sometimes they simply praised his ability to connect. Through it all, Nicholas listened carefully, learning, improving, and staying humble. He never forgot how quickly things could change. One of the most powerful moments came when Nicholas spoke openly in a behind-the-scenes interview. He talked about struggling with self-doubt, about feeling like his voice didn't matter for a long time. He said that stepping onto the Britain's Got Talent stage had been terrifying, but it also gave him something he had never had before: belief. That honesty resonated with viewers even more. People saw themselves in his story. As the competition reached its later stages, the pressure intensified. Only a handful of contestants remained, each with their own fan base and unique talent. Nicholas knew there were no guarantees. But he also knew that no matter what happened, he had already changed his life. On his final performance, Nicholas chose a song that meant everything to him. A song about hope, resilience, and finding light in dark moments. As he sang, his voice carried the weight of his entire journey. The nervous audition, the standing ovation, the weeks of growth. It was all there in every note. When the song ended, the applause felt endless. The judges stood once again, visibly moved. Simon nodded slowly, clearly impressed by how far Nicholas had come. Amanda wiped away tears. Alicia smiled proudly. Bruno applauded with his whole heart. Whether Nicholas won the competition or not almost felt secondary in that moment. What mattered was the impact. The messages he had received. The people he had inspired. The confidence he had gained. After the show, Nicholas spoke about his future. He said he wanted to keep making music, to keep telling stories through his voice. He wanted to reach people who felt unheard, just like he once did. And judging by the reaction, it was clear that people were ready to listen. Nicholas's journey on Britain's Got Talent became more than just a talent show story. It became a reminder that sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is step forward and share your truth. That even if you feel invisible, your voice has power. And when you finally let it be heard, it can change everything. That is why Nicholas's audition left the judges speechless. Not just because of how he sang, but because of what his singing represented. Courage, honesty, and the proof that dreams don't need to be loud to be real. Thank you for staying with this story until the end. If Nicholas's journey inspired you, make sure to support voices like his, wherever you find them. And remember, sometimes all it takes is one moment to be heard to change a lifetime. If this story moved you even a little, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who needs a reminder that being heard can change everything. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.